All right, good afternoon. So today, been working on using AI for finance, right? So there's sort of two areas that I've been looking at in terms of applying AI to finance, and that is risk assessment and reward maximization. Right? So they're kind of like two opposite ends of the same kind of thing, right? So the risk assessment is looking at the different types of risk and trying to analyze whether an asset, try to analyze what the level of risk is of an asset. And then for reward maximization is looking at what the best returns are going to be on an asset. And then basically the idea is that you put these two concepts together and you have risk-adjusted rewards or risk-adjusted returns, right? And yeah, it's kind of interesting because all of the hype lately has been around LLMs, right? And they're obviously really great for, I like to split AI into two different categories, sort of like as a simple explanation. There's words AI, that's LLMs, and there's numbers AI. And that's sort of like the stuff that we had been focusing on a lot prior to LLMs, right? So this needs to actually leverage both of them still for different reasons. Now, the numbers AI obviously is going to be looking at numbers, right? So financial data, things like that, right? Historical price data, price volume action, things like that. And then you've got the words AI, and that's looking at stuff like sentiment analysis. So looking at news, social media, sort of analyzing what the public narratives are, because that actually, narratives drive a lot of the action in markets, right? You can look at, if you look at the crypto markets, it's almost entirely narrative driven. But even in just the regular stock market, you can see sort of retail stocks like Nvidia, Tesla, they're very narrative driven. And probably one of the best examples would have been the GameStop saga, which was really just something else, right? So it's important to be able to understand sort of what the sentiment is, what the narrative is, what are people saying about it, right? And then the other uses for the LLMs in terms of finances, things like generating reports that are readable, right? Obviously, there's lots more that you can do still, with the LLMs, obviously, because they can code, they can actually help write the software to analyze finances, right? So, and this goes right up to even coding like the framework for a brand new neural network, for example, that's custom trained on a custom data set. So yeah, we have all the tools more or less to start making much more intelligent decisions in regards to finance, making it much cheaper to do so, and also more accessible. It's kind of like we are now given the opportunity to replicate a lot of the tools that used to be exclusively for large hedge funds, right? Companies that are managing billions of dollars and have quite significant resources to do so, right? So they've obviously, there are many hedge funds that have been early adopters of AI. Bridgewater comes to mind. But now, again, because of the cost of creating software is much lower than it used to be, and much faster as well, we actually have the opportunity to go ahead and try and replicate these things, in sort of a lean model, right? So it is really quite interesting still. Now, there are a lot of different aspects to risk to take into consideration, right? In the crypto markets especially still, there are actually a lot more different types of risk, right? Because we have things like smart contract risk, which is, if a smart contract is, or a set of smart contracts are put together poorly in a way that opens up exploits. And these can actually be different kinds of exploits. They don't just have to be the primary concern would be that if the project is fraudulent, and they would put in sort of like hidden backdoors into their smart contracts where they could withdraw everything. But it's not limited to that. It also can be limited. It also can include things like economic, sort of like poorly constructed economics of the smart contract that can lead to third-party exploits, right? So it wouldn't necessarily be the guys who are working on the project itself, but someone else who's been able to analyze the smart contract structure, identify an exploit, and then take funds from it, right? Obviously, there's market risk, and this is across every asset class, right? If you choose the wrong asset at the wrong time and the market goes down, then you can see your asset value go down, right? So in order to combat these things, we need to really get into the analysis of it, right? So using all the different tools at our disposal that we have to analyze this financial data, using quite a wide variety of different tools, right? That goes down to like stuff like reinforcement learning, different types of neural networks, stuff like neurosymbolic reasoning. Is actually a pretty interesting concept out there. And then on the LLM side of it, again, we talked about already sentiment analysis and reading through news. But it can also do more. It can look through like the documents of a company, for example. Quarterly earnings reports, right? It can look at the text that's in those documents, extract the number values, pass that off to a service that does the numbers AI, take that back, and then help make decisions, right? Which is pretty interesting, because if you only had the numbers, right, that would be good. But having the numbers be analyzed by an agent that can give you sort of advice in natural language is definitely something different that wasn't available before, right? And this actually falls into sort of the stuff that I've been saying for pretty much since the LLMs really started getting good. I've been pretty adamant about this, is that the best way to use these things is within a system, right? Just using a single LLM to do stuff is limited, right? No matter how good the model gets, it is still a tool in a pipeline, right? You have to sync it up with other things, right? So, I mean, we've seen this with agents doing tool calling, right? They can call out to web search, do semantic search and vector database, all kinds of stuff, right? You can stuff the context window full of data, etc., right? And with the reasoning models as well, too, I mean, they're starting to get better and better at the math part of things, too. Albeit, it's not particularly explainable, right? And this actually goes into another branch of AI called explainable AI, where it has to be able to tell you why it said something, or why it's come to a conclusion, or how it's come to a conclusion, right? So, yeah, putting all of these things together, it really is, it's a team effort, right? You need your numbers AI, you need your words AI, and then you need your regular software, right? So that's your API connections, your databases, and your interfaces for your user to access that. And this is another interesting thing, is that now when people think of AI, it's really interesting. They think immediately of a chatbot, right? And they think, okay, AI equals chatbot, right? Nothing could be further from the truth, right? That is just one interface of many, right? One thing that I've been particularly interested in since AIs have been starting to get good at code is dynamic dashboards, where an AI agent actually generates the front-end user interface dynamically, sort of based on changes that are happening with the data on the back end. And this gets into also some other interesting concepts about self-improving AI, right? Like, I think again, a lot of the focus on self-improvement has been sort of focused around automating AI research in general and getting the sort of like training runs to be better and better and coming up with better training algorithms and things like that. But I think there's also another area of this self-improving where you can have a system, right? And again, because the AI can code now, you can have this system, creating new APIs, creating new parts of the back end, creating new front ends. So it doesn't take much at this point to create a system that is in a sort of a loop where you start at a certain point in the software development lifecycle, and then it will take feedback or collect feedback either from you, the user, or through an automated process looking at data, and then start to come up with its own ways to create new modules for that software. And all of this is like fantastically exciting still, because basically what you can do with this is you can create a system that starts out at a base level with a certain amount of functionality, right? And then you can task agents to continue developing this system, continue improving it over and over again, right? And in short order, you'll have a piece of software that can do the sort of things like I was talking about with the risk analysis and the reward maximization, right? So, yeah, if you're wondering like different ways that you can quote unquote make money from AI, this is definitely one that I think a lot of people are sleeping on. Whereas it seems like most of the things I see about people trying to make money with AI has to do with marketing or content generation, which is really low-hanging fruit if you think about it. Because it doesn't take much to create a blog post or create some marketing material. And we already had the software to automate, the posting of that before AI, right? So, yeah, if you're able to understand sort of like the different aspects, the different parts of these systems, if you can understand how numbers AI work, you can understand how words AI work, you can understand how software, front end and back end works, you can understand how data and databases work. And now that doesn't mean that you have to specifically be an expert in all of these things, but if you have high level domain knowledge, and you can get that using AI, right? Because one of the other benefits of the LLMs, especially the ones that are connected to the web or to a very accurate sort of data source for grounding searches, is that you can speed up learning something, right? Just like explain to me, like I'm a 5-year-old, how the stock market works, right? Explain to me how trading works, explain to me how risk works, explain to me how returns on investment work, right? And in short order, you'll know sort of the high level domain knowledge that you need. And this is great too also if you need to understand software, right? Yes, the AI can code for you, right? And you don't actually have to have knowledge of software to make a piece of software now, but it certainly helps to make good software to know what you're doing, right? Even if it is at a high level, you can learn some vocabulary to better communicate with the LLM. And you'll see that just a little bit of effort, to get a little more domain knowledge in these areas can significantly sort of increase your abilities in terms of what you're able to create with it. So I'm going to cut that off there still, and we'll see you in the next one.